You know, the thing about watching a high-tech surveillance drone explode into a million fiery pieces, raining bits of scorched plastic onto your prized tomato plants, is that it's incredibly satisfying. Up above, my oldest golden eagle, Zephyr, let out a victorious, echoing shriek, a sound of pure, prehistoric triumph. And down the street, Brenda Caldwell, the newly elected HOA president of Whispering Pines Estates, was screaming something at the sky about airspace laws and federal intervention. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the smoke spiral up into the cool morning air. Yep, I muttered to myself. That's drone number 4 this week. You're probably wondering how I, Ethan Vance, a quiet, licensed master falconer living on the edge of the wilderness, ended up in an aerial war with a woman who treated community governance like a hostile corporate takeover. Well, it started, as all bureaucratic nightmares do, with a letter. Not a handwritten note or a polite knock, but one of those highlighter yellow violation notices taped right to my front gate like a passive-aggressive ransom demand. The subject line was just rich, unauthorized structure in rear yard. Potential hazard to community aesthetics. Attached was a blurry photo of what they were calling a structure, which in reality was a reinforced, custom-welded perch pole I'd installed years ago for Zephyr. It wasn't even visible from the street unless you climbed a tree or, you guessed it, flew a drone. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what Brenda Caldwell had started doing. At first, I honestly thought it was a joke. Surely they weren't serious about sighting a bird perch on my property, a 2-acre lot that wasn't even under HOA jurisdiction when I bought it 12 years back. But I was wrong. They were deadly serious, the kind of serious that only comes from a profound lack of hobbies. The next notice arrived 3 days later: violation, wildlife attractant activity. Then another, unsanctioned avian installations, breach of architectural guidelines. That one made me laugh so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. I could picture Brenda, clipboard in hand, squinting through binoculars from her upstairs window, furiously Googling how to legally evict an eagle. Her campaign was just warming up. Within 2 weeks, I'd received 5 separate citations, each one more ridiculous than the last. One accused me of encouraging dangerous wildlife activity through persistent nesting behavior. That's what they called it when Aura, one of my younger raptors, laid 2 perfect eggs in a cedar platform I'd built near the tree line. It wasn't just ignorance anymore. It was targeted harassment, coated in a thick layer of bureaucratic paint. See, my land, the Hawks Reach Sanctuary, backs up directly into federally protected land. I've been licensed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for nearly a decade, rehabilitating injured raptors. My land isn't just mine. It's registered under a conservation easement with rules that absolutely supersede any local zoning or HOA nonsense. But Brenda, she'd been elected HOA president only 6 months prior. She either didn't know or didn't care. She was a retired marketing executive, the kind who treated community governance like a hostile corporate takeover, obsessed with the words community compliance. That became painfully clear the morning I caught her drone buzzing 20 feet over my back paddock while I was feeding Sol, my blind golden eagle. The thing hovered, a tiny, obnoxious mechanical hornet, its lens blinking red as it zoomed in on Aura's nest. I threw a pine cone at it out of pure instinct and watched it zip off toward Brenda's house like a tattletale child. 10 minutes later, I received an email with a screenshot of me mid-throw, subject line, evidence of hostility toward HOA monitoring efforts. I replied citing the 1974 Wildlife Rehabilitation Act and my easement code. You're trespassing on federal rehabilitation land. Kindly adjust your flight plan. I kept the language professional in the actual letter I printed and mailed, but the message was clear. Brenda wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. 2 days later, her drone returned, this time with a longer lens and an infrared sensor. And this time, Zephyr noticed it too. He was perched on the ridge of my garage, his massive, piercing eyes tracking the buzzing interloper like a missile locked onto target. The drone swooped low, probably trying to get a glimpse of Aura's nest again. And in one smooth, terrifying motion, Zephyr launched. His wings beat the air like thunder, and within seconds, he collided with the drone in midair. It exploded in a flash of plastic and whining rotors, spiraling into the grass in front of my shed, Zephyr's first takedown. He circled once, victorious, then landed beside the wreckage and fluffed his feathers like he'd just taken out a threat to national security. Brenda chose panic. That evening, I got a letter hand-delivered by a nervous teenager. Notice of wildlife hazard, aggressive animal behavior. The irony was exquisite. Her drone was the intruder, the one breaking laws, and now she was accusing my eagle of misconduct. I sent a new letter, attaching footage from my wildlife cameras showing the drone invading the nest perimeter. The only response: a new violation notice, non-compliant aerial defense structures. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with ignorance. I was dealing with malice. The following week, Brenda doubled down. She launched a second drone, smaller, quieter, but faster. That's when Aura took her turn. She'd been watching patiently, and the second the drone dipped below 30 feet, she struck. It was cleaner than Zephyr's takedown. No fireworks, just a swift snatch and a crunch of plastic. I left the carcass on the sidewalk outside Brenda's house the next morning with a post-it note. "You're being watched, too." She didn't back off. She bought more drones. She started citing me for excessive bird presence and claimed I was operating a wildlife preserve without community approval. I pinned that notice to my fridge like a trophy. She had a fleet of drones. I had an army of eagles. And the sky belonged to us. 2 drones down in a week had done something to Brenda. She took it as a personal insult to her authority. Her next move was textbook overcompensation. Gone were the off-the-shelf quadcopters. What showed up next was a matte black Audel EVO 2 complete with thermal imaging, 8K video, and a price tag that screamed, government contractor trying to be subtle. I held Zephyr back. This one was faster, smarter. It parked itself 20 feet above the old nesting platform and sat there recording for 38 minutes. I made popcorn halfway through, just staring at it while it stared back. Brenda wasn't hiding anymore. She wanted me to know she was watching. The next morning, the violation notice under my gate read, "Notice of community disruption, unauthorized aerial aggression and interference with community security operations." I laughed, but beneath the humor, a chill set in. She was building a case. And like any good predator, I knew better than to let her outmaneuver me. So, I went on the offensive. I installed 6 new trail cams and mounted 2 GoPros onto Zephyr and Aura with featherweight harnesses. I wasn't weaponizing my birds. I was filming them. And what they saw was extraordinary. The footage that came back from Zephyr's first flight made my stomach twist. He'd followed the newest drone as it patrolled across 6 adjacent properties. It skimmed the edge of the neighbor's roof, and at one point, hovered less than 5 feet from the Wong's upstairs window while their daughter was changing clothes. That one frame, a teenage girl startled mid-blouse with a black drone floating inches from her window, that was the moment the tone of everything changed. I printed it, blew it up to 11 by 17, and mailed a copy to every house on the block with a note. "Brenda says it's about safety. You decide." By the end of the week, 4 different neighbors had called me, furious. But the best response came from Mrs. Halverson across the street, a retired Navy intelligence analyst who referred to Brenda exclusively as General Egomaniac. She showed up at my door with a binder labeled Operations Log, Whispering Pines Surveillance, and said, "Been waiting 30 years for someone else to care about this crap. Let's burn the witch." I collected over 40 hours of footage, GPS flight logs, and time-stamped violation notes. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. No flight exemptions, no permissions granted. Brenda was operating a civilian-grade drone with thermal optics across private property without owner consent. The more accurate term? Spying. Her response? Another fine, this one for $1,250. I framed it and hung it in my outhouse like a trophy. Then I called my lawyer, Nate Clean, a quiet guy who used to be a prosecutor. "She's violating state surveillance laws, trespass ordinances, airspace rights, and possibly federal wildlife protection statutes." I confirmed, handing him my federal rehab license and the 1987 bird sanctuary ruling that came with my land title. "Yeah," he said finally. "We're going to roast this chick." I kept digging. I mapped every drone flight and noted which ones were purchased on HOA budgets. Turns out, 3 of them were bought under the line item community patrol equipment. The receipts were tied to Brenda's personal Amazon account and reimbursed through the HOA treasury. She was not only spying illegally, she was being paid to do it. I received an anonymous envelope one night with a note. "Brenda's been hiding flight records." Check the old archives. Basement filing cabinet. Drawer B. The next morning, I visited the HOA office. Drawer B contained exactly what I was looking for: 37 drone reports, flight logs, target zones, and my name appearing 15 times, with notes like aggressive raptor movement and, chillingly, subject appears to encourage bird-to-drone aggression. The drones weren't Brenda's toys anymore. They were evidence. But the thing about warfare is that escalation eventually hits a wall, and Brenda finally hit mine. The moment drone number 6, the expensive Audle, clipped the edge of Zephyr's nesting box and plummeted straight into protected airspace like a kamikaze with a GoPro. I was in the barn when I heard it. A sickening crunch followed by an eruption of wings and shrieks. That drone didn't just crash. It violated the most sacred zone on my land, the Northern Ridge, etched into the covenant from 1971 and codified in the federal wildlife easement. The no-fly zone, the nesting zone, and Brenda had flown straight into it. That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't just some eccentric bird guy anymore. I was a licensed master falconer, and my land was a sanctuary. I had a digital paper trail of federal crimes. I called my wildlife attorney, Dr. Nain Trevorrow. "Send everything," she said, "and keep the drone intact. Chain of custody is going to be important." 2 hours later, she called back. "This is going to be fun. Karen hasn't just violated a federal wildlife buffer. She's done it multiple times. On record, while serving in an elected position. Your HOA has exactly zero jurisdiction over your property. They're not just wrong, they're criminally wrong." She filed the paperwork that afternoon. By the next morning, I had an email from the DOI, Department of the Interior, confirming receipt of my complaint. Less than 24 hours after that, a white government SUV pulled up outside my gate. Special Agent Darrow stepped out, badge in hand. We spent 4 hours reviewing drone footage, trail cam logs, and the topographical map. He played the clip of the crash. The drone's final 30 seconds of footage showed the nest, it showed Zephyr, and it showed the HOA board minutes pinned to my barn wall in the background, annotated in Brenda's handwriting. "This is gold," he said quietly. The investigation expanded. Nain filed a separate notice with the State Environmental Review Board after discovering the nearly $9,700 in drone purchases over 6 months. Brenda had laundered HOA funds to buy drones that violated federal law and used them to spy on federally protected wildlife habitats. Special Agent Darrow returned 2 days later with a state game warden. They interviewed me for 3 hours. The state wildlife biologist examined Aura's nest. "Textbook violation," she muttered. "They're not getting out of this." Meanwhile, Brenda issued yet another newsletter, this one accusing me of deliberate entrapment. But the final line made me laugh out loud. "Effective immediately, we are issuing a cease and desist on all raptor activity until the matter is resolved in court." As if you could tell a bald eagle to cease and desist. Zephyr stared at me from his perch like he understood every word. I printed that notice, too, and taped it to his perch. "You're officially outlawed, buddy," I told him. He blinked, tilted his head, and took a leisurely crap on the floor of his enclosure. The DOI sent formal notice to the HOA requesting immediate suspension of all drone activity. The HOA's own treasurer resigned the next day, citing possible criminal exposure. 2 more board members followed. I never expected to sue an HOA over a bald eagle, but there was no other option. I remember sitting across from Nain, watching her flip through the pile of evidence. "We're suing them for everything," she said. "Civil damages, federal violations, airspace encroachment, and throw in wildlife harassment for good measure." The lawsuit, Vance versus Whispering Pines Homeowners Association et al., hit the board like a meteor. We filed for an emergency injunction, granted within 72 hours, freezing all HOA operations. The Department of the Interior sent agents to Brenda's house and seized what remained of her drone fleet. The first court day, the courtroom was packed. Brenda arrived wearing a blazer the color of a bruised peach and a smugness that screamed, "This is all beneath me." Her attorney argued that I had incited aggression in avian species for the purpose of weaponizing them. Nain stood. "Your Honor, my client is a federally licensed falconer operating within a state-recognized conservation easement. The defendants flew surveillance drones into protected airspace, spied on him, damaged federal nesting grounds, and misused community funds to do it. If anyone's been weaponized, it's the HOA." And then she played the footage. every frame of it. The GoPro strapped to Zephyr's back as he tracked the drone. The tree-mounted cams showing drones hovering outside bedroom windows. The recovered memory card that had captured Brenda herself saying, "I don't care if it's illegal. I want to see what he's hiding in those trees." The courtroom was dead silent. "Is that the HOA president?" The judge squinted. "Yes, Your Honor," Nain replied, caught on her own drone. Then came the whistleblower. Margaret, former secretary, took the stand. "Brenda told us we had to keep him under surveillance," she testified. "She said the birds were dangerous. She even used HOA funds to buy 3 of the drones. I filed the reimbursement myself. I didn't realize how bad it was until that one crashed near the nest." The judge recessed for 3 hours and returned with a ruling that read like an obituary for the entire HOA board. This court finds the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association under the direction of President Brenda Mitchell engaged in repeated, willful violations of federal conservation laws. The board was dissolved, its authority suspended, and a special receiver appointed to conduct a forensic audit. Brenda's mouth was still open when the gavel came down. She tried to appeal. None of it stuck. What did stick was the $780 fine issued by the FAA and another $2,500 penalty for violations of the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. Her husband moved out 3 weeks later. The for sale sign went up 2 days after that. As for me, I finally had peace. The eagles nested undisturbed. Aura's chicks hatched, healthy and strong. Zephyr took to sitting on the weather vane, scanning the horizon like a sentry on post, and I got to work on something I'd been dreaming about for years. I used the court's awarded damages and a generous donation from Mrs. Halverson to break ground on a brand new raptor center. We built it right along the North Ridge, where the final crash occurred. I named it the Mitchell Sanctuary. The sign was carved in mahogany, letters gilded in bronze. Underneath, in smaller print, a sanctuary for raptors, free from harassment. Some people thought it was petty. I thought it was perfect. The grand opening drew a crowd of 200. The local paper called it a win for wildlife and for every homeowner who's ever had to fight a clipboard-wielding tyrant. Brenda's house sat across the way, shutters closed, grass overgrown, price reduced. It stayed on the market for 14 months before a retired park ranger bought it. He came by one day and asked if we ever needed volunteers at the rehab center. I handed him a clipboard. Sometimes poetic justice takes the shape of court rulings and civil penalties. Other times, it looks like a man cleaning out a house once ruled by a surveillance queen, while 2 eagles circle overhead, free and unbothered. I still keep the framed violation notice, the one that said, "Aggressive bird activity." It hangs in my office next to the signed letter from the DOI thanking me for my dedication to raptor preservation. Some folks win with lawsuits. I won with feathers, patience, and the simple truth that when you go to war with nature and the law, you'd better be damn sure you know who's really watching from above. Tell me, what's the most outrageous HOA violation you've ever seen that involved wildlife? Drop a comment below, hit the like button if you think the law should always protect conservation land from petty bureaucracy, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about eagles winning the good fight.